Welcome to Tool School. Today we're going to talk about Clover's straight pins. Straight pins have actually been around as long as sewing itself, and probably always will be. And that's because there are certain functions that nothing else can provide. We use them to hold our patterns onto our fabric, we hold our fabric together, we use them to anchor embellishments onto fabric so that we know exactly where they're going to be when we actually attach them. Clover actually makes 6 types of pins, and that's because you should always have the right tool for the right job. The first type straight pin we like to talk about is the Flathead Straight Pin, and it's called that just because it has a flat head. The defining feature, other than the head, that makes it so useful is it's a long pin, it's very sharp, thin, but with the head you can see it's very easy to manipulate into whatever fabric that you're using, and you also can see it very easily so it doesn't get lost in your fabric. The Flathead pin comes in 3 different sizes, an extra fine, fine, and regular. You would use the extra fine for very delicate fabrics. The fine would be for fabrics like a satin or silk, and the regular would be just for cottons. It can also be used as a quilting pin. The next pin that we have is an applique pin, and this is a very short pin, and it's used for applying applique to whatever fabric you're going to attach. It's a very short and sharp needle, and because it's so short you can put many needles around a little design without having all the bulk of a longer needle. The next needles we'll talk about are the quilting needles, and they come again in 2 sizes, an extra fine and a fine. The extra fine would be for the more delicate fabrics, the fine would be for your cotton fabrics that we use a lot in quilting. But they are a glass head needle so that you can iron right over it. They're very long and thin and have a very sharp point so they can go through several layers of fabric and hold them in place, and you don't have to worry about the needles sliding back out. The next needles we have are patchwork needles, and they're essentially the same as the quilting needle. They come in 2 sizes, the extra fine and the fine, but they're just a little shorter for when you're not using so many layers of fabric and you don't have the same requirements to hold fabric in place. And then we have the silk needles. Silk needles are a little shorter than the quilting needles, but they have a very sharp point and a glass head, and you can iron over those as well. The last needle we'll talk about is our fork needle, and this has 2 points that's joined together by a loop at one end. The neat features on this pin is that you can actually lay it down and you can pin fabric without lifting the fabric up, and that's useful if you're putting fabrics together that are hard to handle, like a slippery type rayon fabric liner in a coat or something like that. You can also use this to put together blocks of fabric where you want the patterns on the fabric to match up. And you can also use it if you're doing quilt blocks that are odd shaped to hold the quilt blocks in position, because the 2 forks actually give it a little more stability. So those are the 6 types of straight pins that Clover produces, and it should cover all of your pinning needs. That's Tool School. I'm Steve Butler.